Good morning, everyone. Have an excellent Wednesday, and now listen up. The Detroit Lions are finally back in real game action. And even though this is only the preseason, this matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals carries some very important questions for the roster. The final score is not the biggest concern here. What matters most is what Detroit can learn when the lights come on, especially with several positions still surrounded by uncertainty. And one area that immediately stands out is the center position. The Lions recently suffered an injury involving Cade Mays, and that has created a major question about what comes next at center. There are also injury concerns involving Juice Scruggs, which makes this situation even more important to watch. Detroit now has an opportunity to see who can step in and handle the job. Seth McLaughlin is expected to receive a significant amount of snaps, while Michael Nisi is also expected to get opportunities. The focus will be simple but extremely important. How well does this group perform at center when facing real competition? The left guard battle appears to be becoming less of a question, with Christian Mahogany increasingly looking like the player taking control of that position. That means the attention now shifts even more heavily towards center. The Lions had issues at that spot last season, and the team attempted to improve the situation with Cade Mays. But the injury has changed the picture and thrown another obstacle into the equation. Now Detroit needs answers, and preseason football is the first real opportunity to start finding them. This game could provide an interesting test because the Bengals are expected to play their starters for at least a series or two. That means the Lions may get a chance to see how their center situation holds up against a higher level of competition, even if only for a limited amount of time. How clean are the snaps? How does the protection hold up? Can the offense function smoothly? These are the kinds of details that may not decide who wins a preseason game, but they could be extremely important for Detroit moving forward. And then there is the secondary, which may be one of the biggest stories to watch in this entire game. There are still many question marks surrounding that group. Brian Branch is dealing with an injury, while Kirby Joseph is currently away from the team on personal leave. With uncertainty surrounding the depth behind the established players, this preseason game becomes a major opportunity for several defenders to make an impression. Rookie Keith Abney is one of the names worth watching closely. This will be an important chance to see how the rookie performs against real NFL competition. There are also several other players competing for roles and trying to prove their value. Roger McCreary, who was added in free agency, is part of that picture. Christian Izien is another versatile player who could be involved at nickel corner or safety. Nick Whiteside showed some encouraging signs when he appeared in a game last year and also had a solid offseason. Avonte Maddox, Chuck Clark, Thomas Harper, Dan Jackson, and Lauren Strickland are also part of a crowded group with plenty still to be decided. That is why the Lions secondary is such a major storyline. There are a lot of names, but there are also a lot of unanswered questions. Detroit needs players to step forward. Someone needs to make an impact. Someone needs to knock the ball down, force a mistake, make a play, or show that he can be trusted when the regular season arrives. The Bengals are expected to have players such as Joe Burrow and Ja'Marr Chase on the field, which could give Detroit's defensive backs a valuable opportunity to measure themselves against top-level competition. Another player who needs evaluation is Ennis Rakestraw. He is now entering his third year, but according to the information surrounding this situation, he has barely played and barely practiced. That makes every opportunity to evaluate him even more important. The preseason is exactly where these questions need to start getting answered. Winning and losing may not be the priority, but player development, evaluation, and identifying who can truly help the team absolutely matter. That is especially true because many projected Lions starters are not expected to play in this game. For some fans, that may reduce the excitement of the matchup, but for the coaching staff and the front office, it creates an opportunity to take a much closer look at players fighting for jobs and larger roles. Young players need reps. Players competing for roster spots need to show what they can do. And with the secondary carrying so much uncertainty, this game could reveal a great deal about where certain players stand. But there is another name that could attract even more attention than anyone else. Rookie quarterback Luke Altmyer. The quarterback situation behind Jared Goff has changed, and Luke Altmyer now has a major opportunity in front of him. Before Teddy Bridgewater retired, there was already an expectation that Altmyer could compete for the backup job. Now Josh Dobbs has entered the picture after only a few days of practice, and that makes this preseason game even more significant for the young quarterback. Altmyer is expected to receive a huge workload against Cincinnati. He could get the Lions' share of the snaps, and that gives him a real chance to show whether he is ready to handle the pressure of being considered for the QB2 role. Practice is one thing, training camp is one thing, but preseason games provide a different kind of pressure. The decisions have to be faster, the defenders are trying to hit the quarterback, the mistakes become more visible, and the biggest question is whether he can continue to move the offense when the lights are actually on. He could also see action against some Bengals starters, which would make the challenge even more valuable. Can he throw with confidence? Does he make the right decisions? Is he getting the ball out on time? How does he react inside the pocket? Does the pressure affect him? These are the details Detroit needs to see. Josh Dobbs brings experience after spending years in the league with multiple teams, but the Lions already have a clearer idea of what an experienced quarterback can bring. With Altmaier, there is still the unknown. There is the possibility of development. There is the possibility of a higher ceiling, and if the rookie undrafted quarterback can prove that he belongs, it could become an important development for Brad Holmes and the organization. Of course, there will be mistakes. Nobody should expect a rookie to suddenly play like an all-pro quarterback. The important thing is growth. The Lions want to see progress from preseason game 1 to game 2 and then to game 3. Every snap can become part of that development process. Jared Goff is viewed as a durable quarterback, but Detroit still needs to know what it has behind him, and this game could provide the first major look at whether Luke Altmaier is capable of taking another step forward. So, with the center position suddenly under pressure, the secondary full of unanswered questions, and Luke Altmaier getting a huge opportunity to prove himself, this preseason game could tell us much more than the final score ever will. Which of these situations are you watching most closely, and do you believe Luke Altmaier can make a serious case to become the Lions QB2? And that brings us to another player who could quietly become one of the most interesting stories coming out of this preseason game, Blake Miller. The Lions drafted Miller as a rookie right tackle, and now he has an important opportunity to show how quickly he can develop. The injury to Cade Mays has created another layer of pressure across the offensive line, because when one player goes down, the team needs everyone else to be ready to take on more responsibility. For Miller, that means getting valuable snaps and showing the coaching staff that he can handle the right side of the offensive line. There have already been good moments from Miller during practice, but there have also been moments that look like what you would expect from a rookie. That is not necessarily a reason for concern. Young offensive linemen are going to make mistakes, especially when they are adjusting to the speed and physicality of the NFL. What matters now is whether those mistakes become learning experiences and whether we can see improvement every time he gets another opportunity. That is exactly what makes this preseason game so important for him. He needs reps. He needs to see different looks. He needs to experience the pressure of protecting the quarterback in a real game environment. And most importantly, he needs to start building confidence. There is a bigger reason why the Lions need Miller to develop quickly. This is not a team that is simply beginning a long rebuild and waiting several years before expecting results. The expectation is that Detroit has an opportunity to compete right now. That puts additional importance on the offensive line being reliable, because the team needs that group to be ready when the regular season begins. Miller should be given some patience. Rookie mistakes are going to happen. The goal is not to demand perfection from him immediately. The goal is to see growth. We saw how development can happen with young offensive linemen, and the expectation here is that Miller can continue moving in that direction as he gets more experience. So while some fans may focus on the established names who are not playing, I would actually encourage you to pay very close attention to Miller. Watch how he handles his assignments. Watch how he responds after a mistake. Watch whether he looks more comfortable as the game progresses. Sometimes the most important preseason performances are not the ones that produce spectacular highlights. Sometimes it is simply seeing a young player become more comfortable with every snap. And then there is Ahmed Hassan, another player who deserves much more attention than he has received this offseason. Hassan is entering his second season after being selected by the Lions in the 6th round last year. He has not necessarily been one of the names receiving the biggest hype, but that appears to be changing because of what he has shown during training camp. He has reportedly been one of the risers, and that makes this preseason game a very important opportunity for him to prove that the progress we have heard about can translate into an actual game. What stands out about Hassan is not only what he has done on the field, but also the mentality he has shown. He has worked to improve himself physically during the offseason, and the expectation is that his confidence and mental toughness can translate into his performance. Now we get to find out whether that continues when the lights come on. Hassan should have an opportunity to receive plenty of snaps, and this is exactly the kind of game where a player in his position needs to make an impression. Can he create pressure? Can he get into the backfield? Can he make the quarterback quarterback uncomfortable? And perhaps most importantly, can he show that he deserves a bigger role when the regular season arrives? Those are the questions worth watching. The Lions need more players capable of creating pressure, and that makes Hassan's performance even more interesting. Derek Moore is not expected to play because he has been dealing with an injury, so there is an opportunity for other players to step forward. Hassan is one of those players. Imagine the impact if he comes out and produces. If he consistently gets pressure, wins his matchups, and shows that his strong training camp was not simply a product of practice, suddenly the conversation around him changes. Instead of being a 6th round pick trying to make his way onto the radar, he becomes another young player the Lions may have found value in. And that is really what this preseason is about. It is not about celebrating a victory or panicking over a loss. It is about finding answers.